September 15, 1942, brought with it an unprecedented sight along the eastern seaboard of the United States, German prisoners of war stepping onto American soil for the first time. Obergefreiter Hans Müller pressed his face against the small porthole of the transport ship Liberty Star as the Statue of Liberty came into view, her torch gleaming in the morning sunlight. The 23-year-old tank comm Ander from Bavaria had been captured during the North African campaign at El Alamein just 6 weeks prior, and nothing could have prepared him for what lay ahead. The irony was not lost on Miller as he gazed upon Lady Liberty's welcoming stance. Here he was, an enemy combatant, being granted passage to the very symbol of freedom his nation had declared war against. Beside him stood Hauptmann Friedrich Weber, a seasoned officer from Dresden who had fought in Poland and France before his capture. Weber's weathered hands gripped the metal railing as he watched the New York skyline emerge from the morning haze. "Mein Gott," whispered Weber, his voice barely audible above the ship's engines. The towering skyscrapers of Manhattan defied everything the German propaganda machine had told them about America's supposed industrial weakness. The Empire State Building pierced the sky like a steel monument to American ingenuity, while the Chrysler Building's Art Deco spire gleamed in the distance. According to historical records from the National Archives, over 400,000 Axis prisoners would eventually be housed in American camps during World War II, with the first major shipment arriving in the fall of 1942. Müller and Weber were among the initial wave of German Afrika Korps soldiers who had fallen into Allied hands during Montgomery's decisive victory at El Alamein. As the Liberty Star made its way toward the Hudson River docks, the German prisoners crowded against the railings, their eyes wide with disbelief. Feldwebel Klaus Richter, a machine gunner from Hamburg, pointed toward the bustling harbor filled with merchant vessels, naval destroyers, and countless smaller craft. The sheer scale of maritime activity contradicted every briefing they had received about America's supposed lack of industrial capacity. The contrast between their expectations and reality was stark. Nazi propaganda had painted America as a nation weakened by racial mixing and capitalist decadence, a country incapable of sustaining a prolonged war effort. Yet here before their eyes lay undeniable evidence of a thriving industrial powerhouse. Smokestacks belched from countless factories along the New Jersey shoreline, while cranes loaded and unloaded cargo with mechanical precision that spoke of a well-oiled war machine. Young Gefreiter Otto Zimmermann from Cologne clutched his few remaining personal possessions, a photograph of his sweetheart Greta, and a small wooden cross his mother had given him. At 19, he was among the youngest prisoners aboard the transport, and his wide blue eyes reflected both fear and fascination as America's eastern seaboard revealed itself in all its industrial glory. The ship's captain, Lieutenant Commander Robert Hayes of the United States Navy, watched the German prisoners with professional interest. He had transported similar groups before, and he knew that their initial shock at America's obvious prosperity and military might was just the beginning. These men were about to enter a world that would challenge every preconception they held about their enemy. As the Liberty Star approached Pier 47, the sound of automobile horns and industrial machinery created a symphony of American productivity that reached the prisoners' ears long before they set foot on shore. October 2nd, 1942, marked the moment when reality teared the carefully constructed propaganda images that had shaped German understanding of America. As Müller, Weber, and their fellow prisoners disembarked under heavy guard, the cacophony of New York City overwhelmed their senses. The honking of automobile horns, the rumble of elevated trains, and the shouts of dock workers in multiple languages created an urban symphony unlike anything they had experienced. Sergeant Thomas O'Brien of the military police led the processing detail, his Irish brogue cutting through the confusion as he directed the prisoners toward waiting transport trucks. O'Brien had been born in Hell's Kitchen and knew these streets like the back of his hand, but he couldn't help noticing the bewildered expressions on the German faces as they took their first steps on American concrete. Mueller found himself staring at the automobiles parked along the waterfront. Back in Bavaria, only wealthy industrialists and Nazi party officials owned private cars, yet here he counted dozens of vehicles that AP paired to belong to ordinary dock workers. A gleaming 1941 Chevrolet caught his attention, its chrome bumper reflecting the afternoon sun. The owner, a burly stevedore named Mike Kowalski, noticed the German's interest and nodded grimly before returning to his work. Hauptmann Weber's military mind immediately began cataloging what he observed. The organization was impressive. American soldiers moved with purpose and efficiency, their equipment well-maintained and abundant. Unlike the Africa Corps' chronic shortages of fuel, food, and ammunition, everything here spoke of surplus and plenty. Even the guards' uniforms appeared freshly pressed, their boots well polished, despite the industrial grime of the docks. The prisoners were loaded into a convoy of canvas-covered trucks for transport to Camp Upton on Long Island, their temporary processing facility. As the vehicles wound through Manhattan streets, the Germans pressed against the truck's sides to peer out at the passing cityscape. What they saw challenged every assumption about American society that Joseph Goebbels' propaganda ministry had fed them. Feldwebel Richter noticed something that particularly struck him: the abundance of food visible through restaurant windows and grocery store displays. Despite being at war, American civilians appeared well-fed and prosperous. Women walked the sidewalks carrying shopping bags filled with goods, while children played in small parks between apartment buildings. This was not the picture of a nation struggling under the weight of global conflict. The diversity of the population also caught their attention. African Americans, Italian Americans, Jewish Americans, and countless other ethnic groups moved through the city with apparent freedom and purpose. This contradicted the Nazi racial theories that had portrayed America as weakened by its multicultural population. Instead, these different groups seemed to contribute to the nation's obvious vitality and productivity. Young Zimmerman observed the construction sites they passed, where new buildings rose toward the sky despite wartime conditions. Cranes swung steel beams into place, while workers in hard hats coordinated the complex dance of urban construction. Even in the midst of global war, America was building for the future rather than merely surviving day to day. As documented in military records from the Office of the Provost Marshal General, the psychological impact of these first impressions on German prisoners was profound and lasting. Many would later describe this initial exposure to American society as the moment they began to question everything they had been told about their enemy. The truck convoy passed through Times Square, where massive advertising billboards promoted everything from Coca-Cola to war bonds. The electric signs and neon lights created a dazzling display of commercial energy that seemed almost surreal to men who had grown accustomed to blackout conditions in wartime Europe. Even in daylight, the scale and audacity of American commercial display impressed and bewildered the German observers. November 20th, 1942, brought the German prisoners to their first extended stay at an American prisoner of war facility, and Camp Upton on Long Island proved to be unlike any military installation they had previously encountered. Muller awoke in his barracks to the sound of American popular music drifting from the camp's public address system, Glenn Miller's "In the Mood," providing an incongruously cheerful soundtrack to military captivity. The camp commander, Colonel William Morrison, had served in France during the Great War and understood the psychological warfare inherent in prisoner treatment. He deliberately allowed certain aspects of American life to filter into the camp routine, knowing that exposure to American prosperity and freedoms would have a greater impact on German morale than any interrogation technique. Weber found himself appointed as a barracks leader due to his officer status, and his first meeting with the American camp administrators revealed the philosophical gulf between German and American approaches to warfare. Captain James Hartwell, the camp's prisoner affairs officer, treated Weber with professional courtesy rather than the contempt the German officer expected. This civility extended to the enlisted prisoners as well, creating confusion among men who had been taught to expect brutality from their captors. The quality and quantity of food served in the camp mess hall became a constant source of amazement for the German prisoners. Richter, who had survived on short rations during the final weeks of the Africa Corps campaign, found himself confronted with portions that exceeded what German civilians received back home. White bread, fresh meat, and vegetables appeared on the camp menu with regularity that seemed impossible for a nation supposedly struggling with wartime shortages. Camp Upton's library represented another shock to German expectations. Books in multiple languages, including German classics by Goethe and Schiller, sat alongside American literature and technical manuals. The presence of these materials contradicted Nazi claims about American cultural poverty and suggested a society confident enough in its values to allow enemy prisoners access to their own cultural heritage. Zimmerman discovered the camp's educational programs, where American volunteers taught English classes to interested prisoners. Mrs. Eleanor Schwartz, a retired school teacher from nearby Patchogue, drove to the camp twice weekly to conduct conversation classes. Her patient instruction and genuine interest in helping the young Germans learn challenged their preconceptions about American attitudes toward their former enemies. The camp's medical facilities provided another revelation about American resources and values. Dr. Benjamin Goldberg, a Jewish-American physician from Brooklyn, treated German patients with the same professional dedication he showed American soldiers. This violated everything the prisoners had been taught about American racial policies and Jewish influence in American society. According to records maintained by the International Red Cross, American POW camps consistently exceeded Geneva Convention requirements for prisoner treatment, a fact that bewildered German captives accustomed to harsher conditions in Wehrmacht facilities. Recreation facilities at Camp Upton included volleyball courts, a soccer field, and workshops where prisoners could pursue handicrafts and hobbies. The Americans seemed genuinely concerned with maintaining prisoner morale and mental health, an approach that struck the Germans as either remarkably naive or evidence of tremendous national confidence. Sunday religious services revealed another aspect of American society that contradicted German propaganda. Protestant, Catholic, and Jewish chaplains all served the camp, demonstrating religious pluralism that the Nazi regime had portrayed as weakness. Father Michael O'Sullivan, the camp's Catholic chaplain, conducted services in both English and German, showing respect for prisoner religious needs that impressed even non-believers among the captives. The camp newsletter, printed in both English and German, provided prisoners with carefully censored news about the war's progress. While obviously slanted toward the Allied perspective, the publication's existence suggested American confidence in their cause and willingness to engage German prisoners intellectually rather than simply containing them physically. Evening entertainment programs featured both German prisoners performing traditional folk songs and American entertainers visiting the camp. These cultural exchanges created an atmosphere more reminiscent of an international festival than a military prison, leaving many Germans uncertain about their captors' ultimate intentions. January 8, 1943, witnessed an event that would fundamentally alter the prisoners' understanding of American society when Camp Upton organized its first supervised shopping expedition to the nearby town of Riverhead. Miller, Weber, and 12 other selected prisoners were loaded into a military bus under guard, ostensibly to purchase personal items allowed under camp regulations, but the real education began the moment they entered the local five and dime store. Store owner Harold Peterson had initially resisted the idea of German prisoners shopping in his establishment, but military assurances and the promise of cash sales during wartime rationing had persuaded him to participate in the program. Peterson watched nervously as the uniformed Germans, accompanied by their MP escorts, entered his store and began examining the merchandise with expressions of pure amazement. Weber's trained eye immediately cataloged the abundance that surrounded him. Shelves lined with consumer goods that had disappeared from German stores years earlier. Soap, toothpaste, razor blades, writing paper, and countless other daily necessities created an inventory that seemed impossible for a nation supposedly struggling with wartime production demands. The variety of brands available for each product category exceeded anything he had seen in peacetime Germany. Richter discovered the store's candy section and stood transfixed before displays of chocolate bars, chewing gum, and hard candies that American children apparently purchased as casual treats. The Hamburg native calculated that the sugar content visible in this single small-town store exceeded what his entire neighborhood received in monthly rations back home. He purchased a Hershey's chocolate bar with his accumulated camp pay, savoring its sweetness while contemplating the implications of such casual abundance. The prisoner's reactions did not go unnoticed by the local population. Margaret Wilson, a housewife shopping for her family's weekly groceries, observed the Germans with mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Her husband served with the Pacific Fleet, and she struggled to reconcile her mental image of ruthless Nazi enemies with these polite, overwhelmed young men examining everyday American products with wonder. Zimmerman found himself drawn to the magazine rack, where colorful publications displayed American life in all its complexity. Life magazine's photo spreads showing factory workers, movie stars, and SU Bourbon families presented a vision of society that contradicted every propaganda image he had absorbed about American decadence and weakness. The magazine's advertisement pages alone revealed a consumer culture that operated on a scale unimaginable in wartime Europe. The local barber shop provided another cultural shock when camp authorities allowed prisoners to receive professional haircuts during their town visit. Barber Tony Marcelli, an Italian immigrant who had arrived in America 30 years earlier, found himself cutting German hair while sharing stories of his own assimilation into American society. His casual mention of owning his own home, sending his son to college, and planning expansion of his business painted a picture of opportunity that challenged Nazi theories about American social mobility. According to sociological studies conducted by the War Department documented in military archives, these civilian interactions proved more effective at undermining German ideological commitment than formal denazification programs. The local diner where prisoners ate lunch under supervision provided perhaps the most powerful demonstration of American abundance. Waitress Betty Lou Anderson served German soldiers the same generous portions she provided to American customers, her professional courtesy unmarked by obvious hostility. The menu's variety, steaks, fried chicken, fresh vegetables, and multiple dessert options, represented protein and caloric intake that exceeded German officer rations from the war's early years. Young farmhand Jimmy Miller, on leave from his job at a local defense plant, struck up a hesitant conversation with Muller about agricultural techniques. Miller's casual mention of modern farming equipment, hybrid seeds, and scientific crop rotation revealed agricultural productivity that explained America's ability to feed both its military forces and civilian population while exporting food to allied nations. The prisoners returned to Camp Upton laden with small purchases, but burdened with large questions about everything they had believed about their enemy. Their American guards noted the subdued conversations and thoughtful expressions that replaced the initial excitement of their shopping expedition. March 25, 1943, introduced German prisoners to American agricultural and industrial work practices when Camp Upton began organizing lab, or details to address wartime manpower shortages. Muller found himself assigned to Henderson Farm, a potato operation that supplied both civilian markets and military commissaries, where his introduction to American farming methods challenged his understanding of agricultural efficiency and worker relationships. Farm owner Robert Henderson had initially approached the prisoner labor program with skepticism, remembering stories his father told about German militarism during the Great War. However, acute labor shortages caused by military conscription and defense plant employment had forced him to consider unconventional solutions to maintain his agricultural production. Henderson's first meeting with the German work detail revealed men eager for meaningful activity and outdoor work after months of camp confinement. Weber was assigned to Morrison Steel Works, a small factory producing artillery shell casings for the war effort. Factory foreman Patrick Morrison, grandson of Irish immigrants, treated his German workers with the same gruff fairness he showed American employees. Morrison's approach to industrial organization impressed Weber with its efficiency and worker welfare considerations that exceeded similar operations in German industry. The 8-hour workday standard observed at both locations surprised German prisoners accustomed to longer hours under Wehrmacht discipline. More shocking still was the presence of safety equipment, regular break periods, and worker compensation for industrial accidents. Richter, working alongside American factory hands, discovered a labor culture that balanced productivity demands with genuine concern for worker well-being. Henderson Farm's mechanization level amazed the German agricultural workers. Modern tractors, mechanical planters, and harvesting equipment represented technological advancement that contradicted propaganda claims about American industrial backwardness. Muller operated a John Deere tractor that possessed more sophisticated engineering than many German military vehicles he had encountered during his service in the Afrika Korps. The relationship between Henderson and his regular employees demonstrated labor relations unlike anything the Germans had observed in their homeland. Workers addressed the farm owner by his first name, offered suggestions about operational improvements, and participated in decision-making processes that would have been unthinkable under German industrial hierarchies. This informal cooperation produced results that exceeded formal military-style organization in both efficiency and worker satisfaction. Zimmerman's assignment to the camp kitchen introduced him to American food production and distribution systems that explained the abundance he had witnessed during shopping expeditions. Deliveries from regional suppliers arrived daily with fresh produce, meat, and dairy products that maintained quality standards throughout extended supply chains. The kitchen's waste disposal systems, refrigeration equipment, and sanitation procedures exceeded German military field kitchens by considerable margins. According to War Production Board statistics documented in federal archives, prisoner labor contributed significantly to American agricultural output during 1943 and 1944, while providing German captives with intimate knowledge of American productive capacity. Industrial safety protocols at Morrison Steel Works particularly impressed Weber, whose engineering background allowed him to appreciate the systematic approach to accident prevention and worker protection. Safety meetings, protective equipment requirements, and compensation systems for workplace injuries represented corporate responsibility concepts that German industry had not widely adopted. These practices suggested long-term thinking about human resources that contradicted Nazi assumptions about American corporate ruthlessness. The presence of women in supervisory positions at both agricultural and industrial work sites challenged German expectations about American social organization. Henderson's daughter Margaret managed the farm's financial operations and marketing relationships, while Morrison Steel Works employed female quality control inspectors and administrative personnel in positions of genuine responsibility. These working women displayed competence and authority that contradicted Nazi theories about female capabilities and proper social roles. Lunch breaks provided informal educational opportunities as German prisoners shared meals with American workers and learned about family life, personal aspirations, and individual perspectives on the war. Factory worker Joe Kowalski described his son's service in the Pacific Theater, High-S wife's volunteer work with the Red Cross, and his own plans for post-war expansion of his small trucking business. These personal conversations revealed American social mobility and individual initiative that impressed German prisoners despite their ideological training. Evening returns to Camp Upton found prisoners engaged in intensive discussions about their daily observations and experiences. The contrast between propaganda descriptions of American society and workplace reality they encountered created cognitive dissonance that camp authorities monitored with interest, but did not attempt to exploit through formal indoctrination programs. June 14, 1943, brought unexpected cultural revelations when Camp Upton initiated its prisoner entertainment program, allowing German captives to organize traditional celebrations alongside American holiday observances. Muller found himself helping to prepare for a combined Midsummer Festival and Flag Day celebration that would demonstrate the complex cultural dynamics developing between captors and prisoners. The camp's cultural activities director, Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, had studied German literature at Vassar College and spoke fluent German, enabling deeper communication than previous American personnel had achieved with the prisoners. Mitchell's knowledge of German poetry, music, and philosophical traditions surprised prisoners who had been taught that Americans possessed no genuine culture beyond commercial entertainment and materialistic pursuits. Weber organized a prisoners' choir that performed traditional German folk songs during camp entertainment evenings, while American soldiers contributed popular songs and patriotic music that revealed the emotional dimensions of American national identity. The musical exchanges created an atmosphere of mutual respect that transcended political differences and allowed genuine human connections to develop between former enemies. Camp authorities permitted prisoners to receive packages from home through international Red Cross channels, creating opportunities for cultural comparison as German families sent traditional foods, books, and personal items that could be shared with American personnel. These exchanges revealed similarities in family values, religious beliefs, and personal concerns that undermined propaganda stereotypes on both sides of the conflict. Richter discovered American jazz music through the camp's radio programs and began learning to play harmonica in the blues style taught by Sergeant Willie Washington, an African-American MP from Mississippi. This musical collaboration challenged German racial theories while demonstrating American cultural creativity that contradicted Nazi claims about degenerate American art forms. The camp newspaper, now produced jointly by German prisoners and American personnel, featured articles about hometown life, family traditions, and personal interests that revealed common human experiences despite national and ideological differences. Zimmerman contributed articles about German agricultural techniques, while American soldiers shared information about their regional backgrounds and civilian occupations. Religious services, conducted by German Lutheran pastor Heinrich Müller, who had been captured while serving as a Wehrmacht chaplain, attracted both German prisoners and American personnel interested in comparative theology and philosophical discussions. Pastor Müller's sermons, delivered in English he had learned during his captivity, emphasized universal human values that transcended national boundaries and political systems. According to psychological assessment reports maintained by the Office of Strategic Services, documented in National Archives collections, these cultural exchanges produced significant attitude changes among German prisoners regarding American society and democratic values. Educational programs expanded to include American history classes taught by local high school teacher Dorothy Evans, who volunteered her time to help German prisoners understand the historical development of American democratic institutions. Evans' presentations about the Constitutional Convention, Civil War, and immigration history provided context for American social diversity that Germans had previously interpreted as weakness rather than strength. Art classes conducted by prisoners with professional artistic training created opportunities for creative expression while producing works that reflected changing perspectives on captivity and cultural exchange. Miller's watercolor paintings of Long Island landscapes demonstrated artistic sensitivity that impressed American observers and challenged stereotypes about German militaristic mentality. The camp's photography club, organized around a donated camera and darkroom equipment, documented daily life in ways that would have been impossible under normal military security protocols. These photographs, carefully censored but remarkably candid, captured moments of genuine friendship and mutual respect that developed between German prisoners and American personnel despite the circumstances of their relationship. Theatrical productions featuring both German and American participants required extensive rehearsals that created sustained interaction opportunities for meaningful cultural exchange. Production of simplified Shakespeare plays in both languages demonstrated universal artistic values while providing entertainment for the entire camp community. Sports competitions between German prisoners and American personnel revealed competitive spirit and fair play that transcended national rivalries, while teaching German participants about American athletic traditions and democratic approaches to team organization and leadership selection. These cultural activities created an environment where individual personalities could emerge from the dehumanizing context of war, allowing both Germans and Americans to recognize shared human values that would influence their post-war perspectives on international relations and cultural understanding. September 3, 1943 marked a turning point in German prisoner correspondence when Camp Upton authorities, following Geneva Convention protocols, allowed increased mail privileges that enabled more detailed communication with families back home. Muller sat at a wooden table in the camp's letter-writing room, struggling to reconcile his observed American reality with information he could safely share without triggering German censorship systems. Weber's letters to his wife Greta in Dresden required careful navigation between honest reporting and political prudence, as German postal authorities monitored prisoner correspondence for defeatist sentiment or enemy propaganda influence. He described American industrial capacity in terms that emphasized military intelligence value while avoiding direct contradiction of official Nazi assessments about American productive weaknesses. The camp's mail censorship officer, Captain Robert Sterling, reviewed German correspondence with assistance from German-speaking personnel who understood both language subtleties and political implications of prisoner observations. Sterling noted increasing frequency of coded references to American abundance, technological advancement, and social stability that suggested significant attitude changes among the German captives. Richter's letters to his mother in Hamburg focused on personal welfare and camp conditions, but careful readers could detect underlying amazement at American material prosperity and social organization. His descriptions of medical care, recreational facilities, and educational opportunities available to enemy prisoners contrasted sharply with conditions experienced by German civilians under increasing Allied bombing campaigns. The International Red Cross Postal Service enabled prisoner mail to reach German families despite wartime disruptions, creating information channels that bypassed official propaganda control systems. These personal communications provided German civilians with alternative perspectives on American society that contradicted official government assessments about enemy capabilities and intentions. Young Zimmerman's correspondence with his sweetheart Greta revealed the emotional struggle of reconciling personal experience with ideological loyalty as he attempted to maintain romantic connection while processing fundamental changes in his worldview. His letters described American kindness and fairness in terms that emphasized personal gratitude while avoiding explicit political commentary that might compromise both sender and recipient. According to intercepted correspondence analyzed by German intelligence services, documented in captured Abwehr files, prisoner letters from America created significant concern among Nazi leadership about potential morale impacts on German civilian populations. Camp authorities occasionally permitted prisoners to send photographs depicting camp life, recreational activities, and work assignments that provided visual evidence of prisoner treatment exceeding Geneva Convention requirements. These images, when they reached German families, created powerful testimony about American adherence to international humanitarian standards, despite wartime pressures and anti-German sentiment among civilian populations. German families' letters to American camps revealed increasing desperation caused by Allied bombing, food shortages, and social disruption that contrasted dramatically with prisoner accounts of American abundance and stability. These communications provided German prisoners with sobering information about homeland conditions, while reinforcing their observations about American material advantages and social resilience. Pastor Muller's correspondence with German religious authorities attempted to maintain spiritual connections while describing interfaith cooperation and religious freedom in American camps that contradicted Nazi propaganda about American hostility to Christian values. His letters emphasized theological discussions with American chaplains that revealed shared spiritual concerns transcending national political differences. The camp's educational officer, Lieutenant David Cohen, noted increasing prisoner interest in learning English and American history as potential preparation for post-war emigration opportunities. This interest, reflected in prisoner correspondence, suggested fundamental shifts in long-term personal planning that indicated growing appreciation for American social and economic opportunities. Some prisoners began requesting assistance in contacting American relatives whose existence they had previously concealed due to Nazi policies regarding foreign connections. These family reunification efforts revealed hidden networks of German-American relationships that had been suppressed during the Nazi period but could potentially facilitate post-war cultural and personal connections. Mail delivery days became significant events in camp routine, as prisoners eagerly sought news from home while simultaneously dreading information about increasing hardship and destruction affecting their families and communities. The contrast between their relatively comfortable captivity and homeland suffering created complex emotional responses that influenced their developing attitudes toward American society and democratic values. The psychological impact of correspondence comparing American abundance with German wartime deprivation contributed to what camp psychologists identified as significant ideological transformation among long-term prisoners who had experienced extended exposure to American social and economic systems. December 7, 1944, 3 years after Pearl Harbor, found German prisoners at Camp Upton confronting the approaching end of European warfare and the necessity of reconciling their American experiences with uncertain futures. Mueller stood at the camp's perimeter fence, watching snow fall across Long Island while contemplating return to a homeland that no longer matched his memories or expectations. Weber received devastating news from Dresden describing the massive Allied bombing raid that had destroyed much of his beloved city, including the neighborhood where his family had lived for generations. The letter from his wife Greta, written from a refugee camp, described destruction so complete that returning German soldiers would find no familiar landmarks or functioning infrastructure to guide their readjustment to civilian life. Camp authorities had begun implementing repatriation preparation programs designed to ease prisoners' transition from American captivity to post-war German reality. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison, now commanding Camp Upton after his predecessor's transfer to the Pacific Theater, understood that German prisoners faced psychological challenges in readjusting to a defeated homeland that bore little resemblance to the nation they had left to serve in the Afrika Korps. The contrast between American prosperity and German devastation created complex emotional responses among prisoners who had spent 2 years observing democratic society function effectively during wartime pressures. Richter expressed concern about his ability to readjust to German social hierarchies and economic limitations after experiencing American labor relations and material abundance that had exceeded his pre-war civilian standard of living. Educational programs now focused on practical skills that German prisoners could use in post-war reconstruction efforts, including democratic organizational principles, industrial safety procedures, and agricultural techniques they had learned during work details. These skills represented potential contributions to German recovery while serving as living examples of American technological and social advancement. Young Zimmerman faced the most complex readjustment challenge, having spent his formative adult years in American captivity, where he had learned English, developed friendships with former enemies, and absorbed democratic values that would be difficult to reconcile with whatever political system emerged in occupied Germany. His letters to Greta now included tentative discussions about possible emigration to America if immigration opportunities developed after the war. According to State Department planning documents from this period, archived in diplomatic records, American officials recognized that German prisoners returning home with positive impressions of American society could serve valuable functions in post-war German democratization efforts. Pastor Muller organized farewell services that emphasized themes of reconciliation, forgiveness, and international understanding that reflected the spiritual growth many prisoners had experienced during their American captivity. These services attracted both German prisoners and American personnel, who had developed genuine friendships despite the circumstances of their initial meeting as enemies. The camp's final newsletter, published in both German and English, featured prisoner testimonials about their American experiences that provided insights into the psychological transformation that had occurred among long-term captives. These statements emphasized respect for American democratic values, appreciation for humane treatment, and hopes for future German-American friendship that contradicted pre-war hostility and misunderstanding. Medical examinations conducted before repatriation revealed that German prisoners had generally experienced improved health during American captivity, with better nutrition, dental care, and medical treatment than they would have received in wartime Germany. These physical improvements provided tangible evidence of American material advantages and humanitarian values that prisoners would carry home as personal testimony. Cultural exchange programs culminated in farewell performances featuring German and American music, poetry, and theatrical presentations that celebrated shared human values while acknowledging national differences. These events created emotional closure for relationships that had developed between former enemies who had discovered common ground despite political and military conflicts. As transport ships prepared to carry German prisoners back across the Atlantic, many expressed mixed emotions about leaving a country that had provided them with education, meaningful work, adequate food, and respectful treatment that exceeded their expectations and challenged their preconceptions. Muller's final diary entry, written aboard the repatriation vessel, concluded, "America showed us who we could become, not who we were told we must be." The German prisoners' American experience had transformed them from ideologically committed enemies into potential ambassadors for democratic values and international understanding, carrying home perspectives that would influence German post-war development in ways that formal occupation policies alone could never achieve.